is where we discuss the possibilities.
Hi guys, I'm Joe Klemczewski, founder of The Diet Doc, back with my partner, Dr. Kori Probst. We have both been traveling a little bit, so welcome back, Kori. I know you were at a big camp and I was at the Olympia, so looking forward to catching back up.
Definitely, thanks. It's good to be back.
All right. And we're actually both leaving again pretty shortly, so we may have some gaps. It's kind of the summer schedule of travel for everybody.
Yeah.
But I got to spend some time with Coach Paul Revelia, and he was a speaker. Layne Norton had a small camp at a post-Olympia event, and got to meet Andres Vargas, who is a strength coach, actually working with Layne. So it was really cool to hear some different perspectives. Typically, you and I speak at a lot of these different camps, and Layne didn't know I was coming, so I got to just kind of hang out in the background and observe and help out. And I really think there are some cool trends happening that we can talk about. But you were somewhere else. Tell us where you were.
I was. It certainly sounds like the dynamic was a bit different between the two of us. I was helping facilitate a client retreat with our owner in La Grande, Oregon. So not only was the client dynamic different, but the atmosphere and environment was different as well. And gosh, there are so many things that we can discuss in terms of what that experience was like for me, what I noticed among the participants who were there. And I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned in terms of coaching and the best way to go about facilitating client change. So yeah, we have some things we can get into.
Good. Well, I'm really happy. I can't say for a long time that I've come away from an event where I really feel inspired about where our industry is headed. And, you know, if you look at our history going back 20 years when, you know, online coaching and nutrition coaching wasn't even a thing, we created that with our company. And then you saw a lot of people kind of rise up, and now everybody in the world thinks that they can be coaches, and there is no standardization. There's a lot of illegal activity and things that continue to put, you know, regular clients at risk. But I really saw a glimpse of our industry maturing over the weekend. And I want to say that a theme was that people now, the most educated, smartest, most experienced people in our industry are really starting to settle in to this groove where they understand nuance and context and long-term learning are very important, instead of, you know, driving a stake in the ground and saying, this is the way you do something. And I'll say, you know, it started, I'll go with Layne first, because he opened up the camp with a lecture, and by far it was the best I've ever heard Layne speak in terms of the content he was giving. He's writing a book on just fat loss right now. So he's been reading a ton of stuff. He's coming across a lot of the researchers that I've loved for years. So he was quoting a lot from Dr. Kevin Hall from the National Institute of, gosh, I want to say fitness and sport, but that's where I went to school. NIH, is that what I'm thinking of?
Yep, of health. Yep.
Yes. But anyway, he, you know, he really had some great things to say. And it was all about, instead of this is how you do it, the theme was, this is why it's so difficult. You know, biologically, this is what we're fighting against. Evolutionarily, this is what we're fighting against. And research is now showing even things like hyperplasia of body fat cells can happen instantly, almost with one massive meal or binge, but certainly as adipose or body fat cells enlarge to a certain capacity, you can get almost stem cell-like proliferation of new body fat cells. So tons of great information, but it really started, it ended with the fact that this is why every single person with their genetics has to have a plan and a methodology that goes beyond just connecting some dots. There has to be some reasonable digging into your history, maybe even some pretty substantial blood work and test to look at these things. So Layne really talked about that. I'm going to just give you this overview, and then we can pick apart and apply some of the things that you learned at Brittney's.
Sure.
But then I got to meet Andres Vargas, who owns a company called The Strength Cave, and he got a master's in exercise science and is really big in the powerlifting scene. But he does programming for, everybody from general population to athletes. And he did the very same thing. When you're talking about training volume and intensity and frequency and duration and all the variables, he again brought it down to, here are the meta-analyses outcomes, and we can pick apart some of these outliers, and we can look at the context of every study, and we can maybe apply this much to some populations, but it's going to still come down to some trial and error because of your genetics and even your age. I mean, it does show. People say, oh, back in the day, I could recover so much quicker and so forth. And there are real physiology reasons for some things like that he went over. So again, he kind of took the mantle on the training end and talked about those very contextual things. Then Paul Revelia came up and talked about peaking. And he quoted you a few times saying, of all the ways you could peak people and so forth, I found that the progressive linear load that Joe and I have talked about for a couple years is by far the best, but you still have to be careful because this client might need this and this client might need this. And so again, it came back down to those nuanced approaches, which takes a smart, experienced person. Yeah. And then, of course, Layne and Paul both quoted you a couple times, which I was happy to see. Kori, nice. the queen of health psychology. And I mean, seriously, think of this. 5 years ago, would you hear somebody like Paul Revelia say, you know what, because of Dr. Kori Probst, I've really learned to care about, listen to, and pay attention to what's happening in my clients' lives. Like, I want to know what's stressing them out. I want to know what they're dealing with. I want to know how much sleep they're getting and why or why not. And like that is a big boy way of looking at coaching is when I'm
flattered to be honest. Yeah.
So I can't even go to Las Vegas and get away from you, Kori. People are still like, Kori.
No, that's so nice. And Paul, if you're listening, thank you. And thank you for adopting that sort of approach, because I don't know any other way, to be honest. I don't know another way to work with clients if they're going to experience long-term, sustainable, generative change.
Well, that's why when you were in the 4th grade, you were voted most likely to help people, right?
The natural helper.
Yeah. So, where was the psychologist, like chicken and egg debate there?
Yeah. A lot of nature and a lot of nurture, both.
So that's how my weekend was, Kori. Tell me about your week with Brittney, and then we'll see if we can merge these together and find some trends.
Yeah. So I did a general population lecture to start in Brittney's studio prior to the retreat, and it was all about the myths of motivation. We kind of took a brief poll the week beforehand to find out what everyone was interested in, and that word kept coming up repeatedly. And so that's what we went for, and we had a really great turnout. Something that came out of that for me was this concept of self-deception. And a woman who attended asked the question, what do we do if we're deceiving ourselves? And man, we could have talked about that one thing all night long, but it came down to, and this was a theme over the entire retreat weekend too, which is adopting a sense of open curiosity around what the experience is and moving toward and moving forward rather than backing up and avoiding and sticking our heads in the sand, especially in times when we can feel that internal level of tension and it's a bit uncomfortable and we feel a bit rigid and maybe chaotic. Those are signs, symptoms of that something is important, but most people don't look at it that way. So That was one of the themes that came out at the retreat. So we had about 15 ladies who attended, who some were clients of mine, and most of them were clients of Brittney's and Angie Brown's, who is her coach. And we hit on a number of different topics. I did a couple different workshops. One of them was on competing commitments and self-sabotage, and looking at self-sabotage versus as self-protection, and helping people to understand that when they engage in a behavior that they would call sabotage, that they're not actually intentionally, deliberately, consciously trying to hurt themselves and get in their own way. Because at a base level, as human beings, right, we want to thrive. We want to live. We're trying to survive all the time. We're not trying to harm ourselves, generally speaking. And so I had everyone do an activity that really got them to some pretty revealing places. And as they were discussing this with everyone else, it got really vulnerable and raw. And I've done this retreat for 3 years. And every time I've done it, I just noticed this beautiful opening with people who are there, because we structure it to where there's safety, there's trust, and the whole goal in coming is to like unpeel the layers of self-deception and conditioning and beliefs and, you know, messages that were sent that they're not even ours anymore. We're living other people's lives a lot of times, to be honest. And so there was that. Other workshops we did Chopped, and you know, from the Food Network, where everyone gets a basket of food and they have to make something with those ingredients. And there were people there, Joe, who talk about context and nuance and individuality, had never cooked before. They're used to only eating things out of packages. And the fear, the fear that was there. I'm laughing. It was funny in the moment, but for the individuals who were in that emotion, it was pretty terrifying, because not only are they having to do something completely new and out of the ordinary, but they're having to do it in a group where people are watching them. And so they're in their own heads about what those people are going to think and how they're coming off. And so, man, it was just rich, all of these different dynamics. And, you know, I think one of the other things that I was really struck by was, and I mentioned this to everyone at the end, is oftentimes when we're in groups and people are sharing and they're revealing things and they're getting vulnerable and they're putting themselves out there, a lot of the other people involved will rush in to save them. It'll be like, oh, no, that's not how I perceived it at all. Like, that's, no, and you'll be okay. Trust me, it will change. Things like that. There was none of that this time. There was, everyone was there and they were just like listening. They were listening to understand. They were listening to learn about this person's experience instead of listening to save and listening to fix and listening to give an answer. And gosh, if that didn't create that sense of safety, like we can all stand in this tension together and be okay, be better than okay, be amazing. And I mean, it was just like, we can be in this.
I love, if I can interrupt for just a second.
Yeah.
In a place like that where people have come together to learn, I mean, you created that fertile environment where you are, like you said, you're trying to peel back these layers and let people grow. You know, interestingly, first of all, self-deception. I have a book called The Psychology of Self-Deception. It's a young psychologist from the UK, I think, Dr. Burton. Phenomenal just concept in itself. But when I got to our Airbnb, I was staying with Paul and his staff, his coaches. And I mean, the last thing I ever expected to see on the coffee table was Ernest Becker, another psychologist book, The Denial of Death, which is on death anxiety, kind of picked up from Freud and Irving Yalom and people like that. I think he was actually prior to Irving. I'm like, who in the heck is reading this? But you know, what a great way to have some conversations about things that are very much under the surface of just how we might mechanically choose to work on our lives. So, you know, one of the things I would love your perspective on this, just to tie it into what you were learning. Holly also spoke, Holly Baxter, and she did a great lecture on, you know, what we don't know about the nutrition labeling industry and what's in food and so forth, and some of the things we're selecting. So, you know, everybody hungers for that extremely practical, useful information. And that this was in a group of primarily coaches. So maybe 40 or 50 people who are fitness professionals looking for information they can use. You're in this retreat environment with people who are looking to figure all of this stuff out. So I'm really interested to hear, you know, more about how these women progressed through this entire retreat and what were some of the takeaways.
Yeah, well, it was emotional from the start. A lot of the women who attended had experienced some significant losses, like in the weeks prior. So, I mean, they were having to exhibit a tremendous amount of courage just to get there in the first place. So they were pushing down barriers and overcoming fears before they even stepped foot into the building that we were all meeting in. And, you know, we set it up in a way that was, I mean, if I can say we had expectations, it was just that everyone stand in the tension that you're experiencing. Let's work on just being accepting of every emotion that comes up, because it's important. It tells us that there's something to pay attention to. Let's be aware. Let's be open. Let's be empathic of, you know, where each of us is. And we set it up too to where, you know, I started it off with one of my warm-ups was based on the 24 character strengths. So I had everyone pick a note card that had one of the strengths on it and the definition on the back. And we went around the room and we read those, and each person shared something that has occurred in their lives in which they used that strength. Maybe it was the strength of curiosity. Maybe it was kindness. Maybe it was fairness. Maybe it was hope. And so starting it off that way, and then having all of the coaches who were there, it was me and Brittney and Angie, follow up with just prompts throughout the weekend of what strength are you using, guys? Are you noticing that what strength other, you know, your fellow participants are using? It got them into the mindset of moving through the entire weekend and practicing a strength-based way of living. Because when things are difficult and when things are hard, that's not typically where we tend to go. We tend to go to protect and avoid and push away, rather than going immediately to what skills do I have? What resources do I have available to me? How can I approach this situation skillfully? Practically speaking, on the side of nutrition and exercise, we were doing workshops on everything you need to know about MyFitnessPal. And how do you log your food? And why is food logging important? And are you just logging to log, or are you using the logging to assess what's happening and what types of foods you're eating and how much color you're getting in your nutrition and how much fiber you're consuming and how does this food affect you when you eat it? the monitoring piece was really big, not only on the psychological and mental and emotional side, but on the food side and the physical side. The other thing too, in terms of progression, Joe, I saw everyone moving from it has to be this way and this is my routine, and sort of very black and white thinking and behavior into, maybe there are alternatives. Maybe I can soften my approach a bit and be more flexible and actually enjoy what I'm doing as I'm pursuing these goals of health. I was talking to a client yesterday, actually, and we were just discussing nuance and context. And I said, everything that I do in terms of nutrition and exercise is based on a foundation, a very strong foundation of health and well-being. That from there spawns, like, I may eat for performance on some days. I may eat for flexibility on other days. And so it's still, though, I'm basing the flexibility on health and well-being. For my performance, I'm still basing that on health and well-being. And so there was a progression that I saw among all the retreat participants from rigidity to more adaptability and resourcefulness.
Mm. And I love, what a way to bookend this to kind of summarize what we're talking about. Everything that I saw from these fitness professionals in our industry are also moving away from that black and white rigid thinking into accepting of new information. Actually, like science should be done, seeking diversity, seeking open fields of surprise instead of saying, well, I believe this and now let's just try and prove it. Really, really big difference. And what was really cool is while I was out there, I got to meet with a couple of people that I hadn't spoken before about coming on board as fitness professionals with us. So I was in this camp environment. I was with Paul and his staff all weekend. And I just, there were a couple of people that I hadn't met before. So, well, I'm going to be there too. I'm going to talk to you about becoming a part of the Diet Doc. And with very fresh eyes, being able to describe the difference. And this is why you need a certain level of experience and education and support to help you in your journey as a professional, because we need people like that who are going to understand that there is no one single system. You have to be a great craftsman at, as Paul Revelia said, listening to your clients, knowing everything that's happening in their lives, and then shaping that programming experience together based on what's going to be important for them. And everybody else, like I said, like Holly's information, Andre's and Layne's, just so much great information happening out there being brought to the surface, because I think more people are looking at that part of our industry and academia as having that end result of really discovering some new things instead of just, creating businesses, so to speak.
Sure. Well, it's an exciting time when you look at it that way. One of the things that really resonated with me was one of the women who was there. She said, I've weighed less than I weigh right now. And if I'm a little bit, as she said, fluffy, that's where I'm at right now. I feel amazing. I feel sexy and fluffy. I can go hike 14 miles. I'm fluffy, And so that was the other thing too, is I think we do, as coaches, we do our clients a significant disservice if we're not considering that you don't have to be a hard body to be healthy. You don't have to be 10% body fat, ladies, to feel amazing, to have awesome energy, to have your bodies do what you want them to do on the field, on your bike, under the weights, wherever it is. Like, let's really take a strong look at where you're going to feel your best with the foundation of health and well-being. And as coaches, not have this expectation that these people get to competitive levels of body fat. Because I think in the fitness industry, that's been there for a long time. But if you're a coach worth your salt, that's not where you're guiding your clients in the first place. You're utilizing the sort of information that, Layne and Paul are coming out with that can drive true, significant, healthy change.
Yeah, it's always been our challenge for almost 25 years now as a company to try and make normal sexy, so to speak. Instead of saying, well, it's just this particular program. It's no, you have to know some things. You have to know your body. You have to know your genetics. You have to then explore these different avenues, see what fits with you socially, emotionally, and then find your best path. And as much as we've tried to stay in that lane for 20, 25 years, I now see the industry also catching up with us in terms of saying, yeah, that's really important. Let's talk about some of those psychological and emotional things, and let's talk about the fact that this may not be the best thing for you, and you may want to do it this way, but you really should do it that way. So again, man, it's all about nuance, context, and bringing in real science. And I say that tongue in cheek because it's so overused, but really knowing this kind of stuff, it's going to start having an impact, I think, throughout the entire industry and general population. Matter of fact, Layne, of course, is going on Joe Rogan. I think a lot of people know that in the next couple weeks. And after seeing what he's been thinking about lately and writing about, I think the podcast he does with Joe is going to be phenomenal, just in all the areas I'm talking about right now. I think a lot of people are going to be blown away with how much they don't know about how body fat loss is created and maintained.
And is this going to be like on a purely physical, biological level, or is he going to be talking about the emotional components as well?
I think he's going on with another person. Dominique, I believe, is going to be kind of a partnership there with him, and they're going to be discussing different methodologies. So I don't think it's set up as a debate, but we'll see how Rogan himself plays it out between the two. But, they definitely have as much time as they want. And I think, Layne's going to make a lot of these points and explain them very well, as Dominique will.
Great. Well, we will look forward to that. Joe, I have an announcement that we have kind of been talking about for a while on the podcast. Well, it's here.
What? You didn't tell me this. What are we doing?
I created it's a 7-week online course called We Eat How We Live. End emotional eating and change your relationship with food. It's ready. So it officially launches next Monday, September 24th, but you can register now. And I am offering all listeners an early bird discount. So if you go to the website and go to the shop, you'll find the course. And if you enter the code FOODFREEDOM, you'll receive $50 off. You receive that $50 discount. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, let's. We need to talk about this, like maybe in tomorrow's podcast. Let's talk about all of that because you surprised me with that one. I would have been.
I know. Ta-da! Yeah, we can go through the concepts and how I structured it, what I cover in the course, and yeah, it's exciting. It was fun to do. So yeah, let's.
Okay, guys. Well, there you have it. Tomorrow's podcast, we're going to be talking about. We eat how we live. We eat how we live.
Eat how we live. Yep.
Which, like today's podcast, is a big trend that we're going to start really uncovering. It's a big part of some curriculum that we're creating that you'll see hopefully in the next few months. But Kori and I have talked this for almost a year and how to get this message across where people can really use it. So thedietdoc.com is where you can at least see what that's like. And then tomorrow we're going to pick it apart if you're okay with that, Kori.
It's perfect. Yes.
All right, guys. Well, thank you. And we'll catch you tomorrow and we'll go over that. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, guys.